Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. Today we are using one napkin in two different projects. That's right, you get a bonus tutorial. And today I'm going to use my Inktense blocks as one of my major color mediums. So here are all the supplies. So again, I'm going to do two projects using most of what the same thing. Two napkins from NINNYSNAPKINS.com. Three stencils, which are also available at Ninny's, or they are available at TCW, two different script stamps, and a heart stamp, as well as a sentiment from my Winged Wonders sentiment pack. So let's get started on the art journal page. This is 8.5 by 11, and I've given it a coat of gesso. And I'm going to use this Loving Birds and Music Notes napkin, both of them. Now, when you open this up, you can see you have kind of the inverted pattern. They're looking one way and the other, and that gives you options when you are setting up your composition. So I am just going to release the focal image from the square napkin shape, and that just allows me to audition it on the page and get a better idea of how much of that. Now, I love the watercolor effect coming out from the birds in the heart. I'm not sure at this point how much of that I'm going to leave, and I kind of figured that out as I go. First step, you want to peel off the excess plies. Usually there are two. I just wet my fingers, and as you saw me doing here, I just pull off those extra layers very carefully. Now I want to water cut closer to my image. Now my background here is pretty much white, so it's going to go very translucent, but I don't like having the excess there, and some of the elements that are there, I am cutting off. Now, why am I using a water brush or my liner brush with water instead of using scissors? I like the deckled edge. I find that it disappears a little bit better than the straight edge that you would get with scissors. But you can definitely cut it with scissors. I would just leave the plies on before you cut, or cut first and then take the plies off. So here you can see I'm taking off some of that color that is not strictly that heart in the birds. And I'm figuring out how much of that I want to keep and how much of it I want to get rid of. And I do cut off some more later. Now I can put it on there. See, I've already, once I've put it on the page, I know I want to get rid of this, I want to get rid of that. And then I'm going to make a background that fits. If I put the music notes underneath this napkin, it's going to show through, and I don't like that look, so I'm going to avoid that. But I'm going to start with gluing the bird focal down using my fluid matte medium. This is Liquitex brand. I buy it in a bigger container and put it in a smaller one, and that's the way I get a good price point on it. I use a liberal amount of the matte medium. I find that it just works better. So I put it on half, pull it down. I'm just pressing lightly with my fingers. You can use a piece of saran wrap. That kind of goes smoother and you're less likely to rip the napkin. And then I'm putting some matte medium on top. I'm sealing that napkin. I want to turn it into a non-porous surface because I know I'm going to, or there's a good chance that I'm going to colorize it, and I don't want it to bleed or look funny. So you want to seal it. So then I lift up the other half and put it down very lightly with my fingers. This napkin is absolutely lovely, and I've wanted to use it for a long time, so it's been sitting on my table for a while, and today is the day. I did not have it all figured out how I was going to make this work, but that's what you need to do. So here is the music notes napkin. This is a good basic napkin that you could use on so many art journal page to add a little bit of collage. So I'm just going to cut some of this music notes off so that I can easily peel off the backing and leave the backing on the rest of the napkin. It just gets, the napkins get very, very fragile, and you're more likely to damage them if you take off the backing ahead of time. It's just easier to store with the backing on it or the extra plies. So now that I have a section of this, I am going to peel off the excess and water cut sections of this that I'm going to apply as collage papers onto my background. Now, if you don't have this music napkin, that's fine. If you have stamps, you will be able to use them, and you can make your own by stamping on the plies. Now, that middle ply actually had enough ink on it that you can see those music notes. So I'm going to keep that second layer and use it on a different application. So grabbing my liner brush, I'm just going to select parts of this and try to fit it onto my page. I like the scale of these music notes. So many of the stamps are really, really small. You don't even see that they're music notes necessarily. So this is a nice alternative to if you don't have the size music note that you want. I'm just going to put a couple of them, 2, 3 of them on the page. And then just like the focal image with the birds, I'm just going to glue this down with my fluid matte medium, a coat underneath and a coat on top. And you can see the edge of the napkin, you can't even see where they are. So in this background, I have a lot of layers. Now I take my fluid matte medium brush. I know I'm going to glue my sentiments down later, so instead of throwing it in the water and wasting everything, I just wrap it in saran wrap. So here I'm going to add more to my background. I'm using archival ink and a script stamp. And you'll notice as soon as I put some of that script stamping over top of the music notes, it pushes those music notes back. Remember, the music notes aren't the focal image. Then I grab another stamp here and just adding to the background. Now, a lot of times you'll see me using acrylic paint to stamp with. I am not using acrylic paint here because I don't want it as dark as what I get with acrylic paint. I want it more muted. I want it, this is a background. So I'm using the archival ink. So let's use my Inktense blocks. These are inks in block form and they are permanent when dry. That's the difference between watercolor. But they act just like watercolor. You activate them with water and you get that same effect. Now, since my napkin is watercolor, I am just going to make my background that kind of looks like some of that background that the artist of the napkin had. So I have my swatches and I'm matching the colors that are in the napkin and just picking the blocks that are as close as possible. I love using my Inktense blocks on a background because they are permanent, just like acrylic paints, but they're more translucent and they are so easy to use and they last forever. So while you may pay $2 per stick, they do last forever. I've had my set for 8 years. So as you saw, I just scribbled them on and then I'm activating them. And I'm putting some of the yellow, some green, some blues, some teals, whatever colors are in my focal image, that's what I'm going to put into this background. And I'm just building it as I go. Once it's dry, it's permanent, so it doesn't necessarily reactivate, so that you can layer on more colors and you're less likely to get mud. So I'm just adding green and I'm going fairly intuitively. And by that, I'm evaluating as I go. Do I like this? Do I not like this? Do I need to add this color? What? So I'm going to add some yellows in there, some purples, some of that pink coral is going into the background. And if you want it deepen the color, you simply add more pigment. The thing I like about the Inktense pens or blocks as well is they are very matte. There is no shine that you might get with different acrylic paints. Some acrylic paints are more matte, some are more glossy. Um, these are very, very matte and flat. And you have no problem. You're not blocking out any of that stamping that I have in the background. So I just want a nice, soft watercolor background. And that's what I am working on developing here. And I keep grabbing from the block. So you can either scribble right onto the page on that gessoed surface. Remember, it is a gessoed surface, and that's important so it doesn't soak into the paper. And you can easily blend them. Or sometimes I just get the wet brush and I get the ink right off the block. Doesn't matter how you do it, all those ways work. You can also make a puddle of the paint and use it as you would watercolor. So even the part around the bird in that heart shape, I'm just able to paint the entire background with my Inktense blocks. I have a whole series, I believe it's 5 videos that I made way back when I first started my YouTube channel. So quality isn't there. But the value of the information is, and it's all about the Inktense blocks and how to use them as stamps and all the different things about using them. So if you're interested in them, you may want to go check out those 5 videos because they have multitude of uses beyond what you see me doing here. So here I'm adding some purple, and then I'm going back and I'm adding blues and purples and teals just to make a colorful, interesting background. I have the collage papers there. I have the stamping that I did. Once it's dry, it dries a little lighter than what you think. So you might want to go back and add more color. And FYI, I actually do later down in the video. Music notes, which I'm loving, are a little bit more dominant than I want. They're bolder. So I am giving them a very light wash. I just took a little bit of gesso and water, and I'm just ever so slightly pushing it back so that they aren't so forward. I want my birds in that heart to be the focal image. That's where I want your eyes to go first. So just pushing it back. And no matter what element you have in your background, this is a technique that you can use to throw things back. I wanted to add some hearts to the background to kind of mirror the heart around the birds. This is a newer stencil from the Crafter's Workshop called Heartfelt. And I'm just using white acrylic paint and stamping on it. Now, this is lightening the background a bit. It's knocking back more of that background. Some of those music notes are just disappearing. And I wish I would have waited to mute the music notes after I did this, because this may have just done the trick and I would have been able to skip that step. But you do what you do and you evaluate as you go and change things up. So I'm liking the hint of the heart there. But I am going to admit my background is very pastel, very soft and muted. It's lovely, but it's not my usual. I typically go for the brighter and bolder colors. So I'm struggling a bit with that, but I'm going forward, moving forward, and I'll adjust as I go. So now I'm grabbing those Inktense blocks again, and this time I'm using them to tweak the colors to brighten the colors of my focal image. And I do this in two ways. Sometimes I add a little bit of gesso to the color that I get off the block by using a wet, or I'll put gesso on right on the bird, like here you see me putting it on the bird, and then I'll colorize it. Either way, but adding gesso makes it a little bit more like acrylic paint and gives that painterly effect. Whereas here, I'm just dropping in the purple right on top. That's just putting a coat on top and just enhancing the color. So depending what look you're going for, you can do either. Mix it with gesso, although gesso automatically is going to mute those colors because it's white gesso. But then you get that painterly effect. I typically, when I go to colorize my focal image, I typically do both. And I like that effect. So here I'm just taking the color right off the block and painting it over top of that, the bluebird there, that I've already put some gesso on. I just want to brighten these colors a little bit. I don't want to change them, although you could change them. You could actually put a wash of a different color and alter the color to match something. But I still want that watercolor look. Someone asked recently if the gesso, when I rub gesso on the blocks, if it damages the blocks or change them, and I've not noticed any problem with it. I don't wash the block if I get some gesso on it. I have never worried and have never found it to be a problem. So here I'm adding gesso to these coral flowers, and I'm just dabbing kind of or globbing the gesso on. And then you're going to see me rub the color off the block and just add it on top. And I don't even wait for the gesso to dry. And I'm not overly concerned about keeping the exact shape of the flower. The more you do of this overpainting, the easier it gets. And the more I do, the more I realize I don't have to overthink it too much. So here I'm just adding color on top of the gesso that I've added, and that makes it look like it's painted, not a napkin. Just making those hearts stand out a little bit more. I don't want my focal image to compete with the background. So that's, you're going to see me doing a dance. I lighten and I brighten. Here I'm adding a little bit more of that coral to the background so everything works together. Remember I said you can add depth of color just by going in once it's dry and either layering another color on top or just more of the same to get a darker tone. I have the 72 pack of Inktense blocks. I would think the 36 would be sufficient unless you get a great price point as I did for the 72. And here I'm tweaking the colors. I'm approaching that finishing stage where I'm just looking and what needs adjusting, what needs more. Here I'm taking some of the brown and highlighting I think it's like a grapevine wreath that makes that heart. I want to see that heart a little bit more. I wasn't quite getting the depth of color here with the block. I do believe I ended up grabbing some brown acrylic paint and painting that grapevine wreath in, but I lost that footage. I'm thinking I'm approaching the end, so I'm shading around. I'm using my angle brush and black acrylic paint and just getting that muted edging all the way around. It just frames the picture or a page in a soft way. FYI, you can do the same with the Inktense block, the ink. So I'm grabbing my Winged Wonders sentiment pack and I'm looking through it for whatever sentiments might work with my focal image. And I'm picking out several, which is my usual process. Some are bolder fonts, some are bigger. And I'm just going to pick up, they could be humorous, they could be serious, what have you. So if you like things with wings, dragonflies, butterflies, angels, fairies, birds, the Winged Wonder Sentiment Pack, you may want to check that out. It's available as a digital download at NINNYSNAPKINS.com. There is a link in the description box below. So I have an idea of which way I'm going to go with the sentiments, and I stenciled those leaves on that grapevine wreath, and I lost that footage. But later on in the second project, I do that again because I really like that technique. So you'll be able to see it step by step at the end of the video. But basically, on this one, I took the 12-inch of the Faithful Tree from the Crafter's Workshop and here I'm using acrylic paint, and it's a mixture of brown, uh, Prussian blue, and Hooker's green. And I'm just adding some leaves around that just to make that focal image stand out. Then I decide I needed to add a little bit more detail, a little more interest to my background. I didn't have enough contrast. So I'm using Prussian blue here and the Art Deco leaves from the Crafter's Workshop and just adding some interest, some contrast, some more patterning. There just seemed to be on that left side just too much open space. And I didn't like that. It didn't seem to have a purpose. So here I'm just going to add a little bit more interest. And I just kind of don't want them all even. So I'm selecting what parts of the stencil I want, extending the stencil by moving it and realigning it, figuring it out as I go, basically. I like that. It doesn't look like it's drifting off. And then I want to add just a smidge up here as well. So this looks like it is in the forest in the background, and maybe there's flowers, muted flowers in the far distance, but the birds are in the tree. And I'm very happy with it at this point. That being said, why stop now? So I'm taking some white acrylic paint and putting it on the script stamp, the same script stamp I used earlier with black archival, which you can still see peeking through, and I'm adding it on top. Here I'm brayering on the paint and just stamping. And it's just, again, one more layer. I don't even know how many layers that I have on here. Some pages are like that. The next project is very simple, using the same napkin and some of the same techniques, but I've really simplified it. So you can pick and choose how complicated, how complex you want to go. Sometimes simple is better. Sometimes we just want to layer and layer and layer. So here I'm adding a little bit more color. I decided that I want a little of that coral, a little more of that coral in the background. So I'm just using the block, scribbling it on. And you can see I put that coral right on top of the green. It did not reactivate the green and turn to mud. That coral is still there. So that's one of the benefits of using the blocks. Here I'm adding some more purple. I want to brighten those colors. I'm fighting that muted pastel thing. I love my bright colors. But if you liked it all muted, then you stop there. Everybody to their own. I grab the sentiment. If you want to fly, give up everything that holds you down. Let go of things that are weighing you down. And I cut it apart just to spread it out, to make it more fit the page. Grab my Posca pen, my black Posca pen. I'm just outlining it here. I could have used the shading technique around here. Then, since my Posca pen is out, I'm just going to do some sketchy lines around the edge of the page. I do add some splatters of gold, but there we have pretty much the finished. I love the bright colors. I love how it all came together in the end. Lots of layers and lots of fun. So let's get on to project two. Like I said, this one is much simpler. And halfway through the other one, I was doubting my color choice for the background. I said, oh, should have gone neutral. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going very neutral, very simple. So the beginning steps are the same. I'm taking that napkin, I pulled off the excess plies. I'm going to put this one on a 6x6 card base that you can order from Crafter's Workshop. There's a link in the description box. And I'm just going to get rid of the excess by using my liner brush, using that water cutting technique. Just my preferred way of doing it. So again, this is exactly the same as what I did previous. But this time I know I'm going to remove all the excess coloring because I'm not putting a colored background, so I won't be able to hide it. My background's going to be very neutral. So there you see, I'm cutting it all off. Now I could take that and collage that onto a page and use it as collage papers. Sometimes I have a bucket and I just keep all those things in there and then I just break the page with it. It adds texture, color, a little bit of pattern. So there, basically all I want is that heart shape. It fits perfectly on this 6x6 card base, but there's very little extra. So I don't feel the need to do a lot in the background because not a lot's going to show. Most of it is taken up by the focal image. This is a envelope that I made out of copy paper. I did put a coat of gel medium or gel fluid matte medium on it to seal it. I just taped the edges. I just make a pocket so I can put my card in here to keep the inside of the card from getting dirty. I'm a messy crafter. And if you are too, that might help. So the last one, I glued it down with the white background, but here I'm going to colorize my background very lightly. I'm going to use unbleached titanium and white gesso. And I'm just going to mix that with a makeup sponge right onto that card base. This is so, I'm just colorizing it. I like using the gesso. This gives a very mottled, it lightens that titanium, uh, unbleached titanium there. This is just one of my favorite ways of making a very simple background. And you can see you've got some areas that are darker, some areas that are lighter. Where it's too dark, let it dry, and then you can come back with the white or add the dark color. This card was a very quick, easy. If part of the reason for it to be quick and easy was that I already figured out some of the things that I liked in the first page. So you always take what you learn and go. I want to add a little heart detail because I'm going to use that heart sentiment. And I'm using the unbleached titanium, not lightened, and just stamping the hearts where the birds aren't going to be. So at the top and the bottom and a little bit on the sides. I just want a little bit of patterning there. I'm not going to be doing too many layers on the card. I'm liking that, but I do need to put a few of those hearts on each side. And then I'm just going to make sure that dries perfectly. Use my heat tool. I'm just adding some script, and this is a smaller scale script stamp than the other one. And I'm using my archival ink because I do not want it big and bold. I want this very soft, and I don't necessarily want it underneath where the bird is. I grab some brown and I'm just edging with the brown. Has that vintage feel, neutral color. So black I thought would be a little too harsh here. Then once again, give that a dry. And then I am gluing down my focal image. Exactly the same. I do half, put some fluid matte medium underneath, fluid matte medium on top to seal it, flip up the other side, and then glue it down to seal it because I am going to do some overpainting again, just like I did in the first project, but I do speed through it here because you don't need to see me do it twice. So here is how I stenciled on the leaves using the Faithful Tree. Now, instead of the 12-inch stencil, which I used on the first page, I'm using the 6-inch one. And I'm just adding leaves, making and building out that grapevine wreath a little bit with some more foliage, just to make the heart a little bit more predominant. It wasn't as necessary on the card because it's not competing with that a colorful layered background. This background doesn't compete at all. It's very muted and soft. And again, I'm mixing it with some of the brown, Prussian blue, and Hooker's green. And I chose those colors because those are the colors that are in that focal image. Without adding the brown, it was a little too teal, a little too green. Adding that brown really changed the tone and made it match my focal image. So that's a trick. You can always add a little bit of brown, a little bit of black, or Naples yellow. Now I glued the napkin down after the background here, and I could get away with that because the background was very light. If it was a solid blue color, I would tend to glue the napkin down first and then colorize like I did in the first project. And then using, different amounts of the green, the blue, the brown gives some variation to those leaves, which adds a lot of interest to your page. I never like using just one color or one shade of a color. Variation makes for interest. So just by doing that, adding that leaves, you're making it your own. You're taking art that somebody else has done and tweaking it. And now I'm going to do the overpainting. And if you compare the two, they're not exactly identical. You get variation. So if I was taking this Loving Birds napkin, I could make 4 cards. Each one could be slightly different. You can mass make them. They're quick, they're easy. Change up the sentiment. Don't put a sentiment at all, or just put hello or something very, very general. So here I'm back to my Inktense blocks, and I'm just, after putting the gesso, just adding the color in there. I like the Inktense blocks also because they are not liquid based. So if you travel, you don't have to worry about taking liquid on a plane or having it spill. You can just have a bottle of gesso or matte medium to activate it, and all you need is water when you're at your new destination if you want to, you know, or going on a create date. You can see my blocks. Many of them are broken. Broken Inktense blocks still work. So in the comment section below, Which page would you be more likely to do? The 6x6, the card, which could also be on a 6x6 canvas or an art journal page that's that same measurement? Or do you like the more complex one? Is that more your style? Which background do you like more? Do you like it more neutral, vintage, or do you like it with the colors? The good thing is we don't have to choose. We can do them all. So at the end, I have close-ups of the finished project. Here I'm just gluing down the sentiment. I was going to split it up and put it on one on the left-hand side and one on the right. Changed my mind, so I ended up just layering it back together. And then that white was a little too stark, so I just grabbed that unbleached titanium and watered it down and gave it a wash just to get rid of that white. I wanted a sentiment. The heart wants roots, the mind wants wings. I'm using my Sakura glaze pen here just to outline it. Kind of got a little too messy there, so I come back and shade in a minute just to cover up my mistake. I'm just adding some sketchy lines around the card. And yeah, there's the mess. So I just grab my angle brush and I just shade with the brown and it just kind of hides the mess that I made. Always a way to hide it. So there is the finished card, all ready to pop in the envelope and send away. Oh, after I've splattered with gold. And after splattering this one with gold, I liked it so much that gold works so well with the yellow on the one bird that I splattered the first page. So if you notice in the final pictures that are coming up, there's some gold splatter there as well. And that's just thinned gold acrylic paint, Liquitex Basics. And there we have it. Thank you so much for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, give me a comment, and like the video. Until next time, go get creative.